Welcome. Welcome to the February 2023 CEC 20 meeting. I will now take a roll call. Say that again. Yeah. I will now take roll call attendance of the members. Steve Stowe, President. Here. Jennifer Hugh, First Vice President. One second. And if anyone sees members in the chat or in the room, please just give me a heads up. Elizabeth Chan, Second Vice President. Vito Lavella, Recording Secretary.
Present.
Thank you. Marie Brugaris, Treasurer. Marie, are you there? Okay. Gada Amin. Gada, are you there? Yona Isufi. Yona, are you there? Li Ping.
Yes, hi here.
Hi, Li Ping. Maya Rosenblatt. Maya, are you here? Joyce C. Joyce, are you here? And Kevin Zhao. Kevin, are you here? Okay, we have 3 members present. We can still hold the meeting. We just can't vote on anything. There's Tony from Justin's office. Okay. Bear with me one moment. Okay. Okay. Before we begin, I just want to make a couple of announcements. One is that we have interpreters here with us, providing interpretation in Arabic, Mandarin, and Spanish. You should see video of these interpreters. They will now introduce themselves and provide instructions for anyone who would like to dial into one of the interpretation lines. Could our Arabic interpreter please introduce yourself?
الرقم 347.
أهلا بيكم ومساء الخير. للحصول على الترجمة العربية الليلة معانا عليكم الاتصال ب 347-966-4114. هقول الرقم بالعربي مرة أخرى 347-966-4114. بعد كده عليكم إدخال الرمز الآتي 355-235-426. مرة تانية الرمز 355-235-426. بعديها علامة الشباك للحصول على الترجمة باللغة العربية. للاستماع من فضلكم لما تشغلوا الزوم وطوا الصوت على الآخر خالص بحيث تستمعوا فقط للترجمة العربية من خط التليفون أو الهاتف الخاص بكم. شكرا بكم. أهلا بكم.
Hello? I can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Can you say it again?
Buenas tardes y bienvenido a la reunión para acceder a la interpretación en español por teléfono. Llame primero al 347-966-4114. Luego marque el código 2864-1795, signo numeral. Repito, para acceder a la interpretación en español por teléfono, marque el 347-966-4114. Luego marque el código 286-41-795, signo numeral. Gracias.
爸爸要去这些喷你。爸爸，
I'm sorry. Is the host speaking? I don't think we can hear them on over the Zoom.
PlayStation
Now you can hear me.
2的
Yes, now we can hear you.
Sorry about that. Can the Mandarin interpreter please introduce themselves?
您好，你好，我是您的英文翻译，我会翻译所有您所说的话，说话请保持简短。然后呢，这个电话号码可以连接到这个中文的那个热线是34796641114，然后呢 ID 号是736271826，井号。在这个过程当中，请保持安静。非常感谢您。
Great, thank you so much. Tonight, at the end of the calendar meeting, we will have a public speaking session. If anyone would like to sign up for public speaking, they can do so either in person on the form or online. There's an online form that is on the website and that our administrative assistant, Kevin, will also post into the chat. So the agenda for tonight, I'll just go over the agenda. Kevin, are you able to share that? To the agenda. There. So first, we're going to have a welcome from the school color guard. Then we're going to have a presentation on the fair student funding budget, and then we're going to have a presentation from the Office of School Design. Can you scroll down, Kevin, please? Thank you. We'll have a report from Superintendent Dr. Preto, report of Council President, public speaking session, and then 2 resolutions on gifted and talented admissions and the Lunar New Year as a state holiday. And we'll close out the calendar meeting, approving the minutes. And then the business meeting follows immediately at the end of the calendar meeting. Okay, without further ado, we now have a welcome presentation of colors from the school color guard. We're here at MS 936, PS 939. And hopefully we can position the camera so that they can be seen and heard.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and which stands one nation under God, indivisible, justice.
District first in front of it. It's okay. Just because the district I think it's a little surprising to have the public comment after the first student. So anybody who's gonna log on and like put comments in the chat and make comments. So I have to gather it to send to Central to make sure all the public comment is shared.
Suggestion to have a public comment session just on fair student funding immediately following the fair student funding presentation. So we would need to just to make a motion to add that to the agenda. So is there a motion to have a, let's call it a 10-minute, 10-15-minute public comment session just on the fair student funding section right after that presentation?
Motion
I
to add.
make a motion to add.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Yeah. Okay. And I just want to welcome, acknowledge a number of guests we have here with us tonight. As always, Superintendent Dr. David Preto, Deputy Superintendent Dr. Joe O'Brien, Family Leadership Coordinator Bill Chin, Family Support Coordinator Sylvia Jasinski, UFT Representative Ariel Arroyo. Representing the CSA tonight is Principal Margaret Russo. And then from different elected offices, I know that I've seen Maya Yadin from Senator Gurnardis's office, Tony Krupshin from Councilmember Brannon's office, and Donovan Swanson from the Borough President Reynoso's office. Those are the ones I've seen so far, and apologize if I missed anyone. And then we have a large team. I'll introduce the Office of District Planning team when we get to their part of the presentation. But for right now, we'll just have Dr. Preto start on the Fair Student Funding presentation.
Sounds good. Thanks. Thanks so much. Good evening. I also want to wish everybody celebrating So I wanted to wish everybody a happy Lunar New Year, a happy Year of the Rabbit. We've had. I think you need to mute your
That's
the volume. No, the volume.
That's muted.
No, the volume on your computer.
Speaker and
Yeah.
I just got this. Go ahead. Figuring it out. Go ahead.
Okay. Third time's a charm. Happy Lunar New Year. Happy Year of the Rabbit. Been attending some amazing events and performances and celebrations in a lot of our schools, including PS 160, PS 105, PS 310, PS 170. So we're really excited to be celebrating the new year. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the annual school budget engagement session. I'm Superintendent Dr. David Preto, and I'm happy to be here with our district budget representative, Elba Rodriguez. Gil Palmer was unable to make it, so Elba Rodriguez is here representing the district from the budget director end. And Elba supports schools directly with all matters related to budgets. Every spring, the Panel for Educational Policy, or the PEP, votes on the DOE budget allocation formula for the following fiscal year. In preparation for this event, superintendents and borough-based support staff present the DOE's proposed fair student funding budget allocations for fiscal year 2024 to all community and citywide education councils. The purpose of today's presentation is to review the DOE's budget and allocation formula, review fair student funding and the proposed changes for fiscal year 2024, which aligns with the 2023-2024 school year. This presentation marks a new approach in how New York City Public Schools is conducting community engagement around our school budgets and any proposed changes to the fair student funding formula. Our goal is to increase our transparency in ensuring that you, as critical community stakeholders, are made aware of how schools are funded and made aware of the resources available to you to better understand your school budgets. Our new approach is a change that was one of a few recommendations made by the Fair Student Funding Working Group. Convened in July 2022 at the request of the Chancellor, the Fair Student Funding Working Group worked over the course of 4 months in partnership with national school finance experts and our own finance team to deeply understand the current fair student funding formula, look at New York City school demographics, and make recommendations for changes to the formula. The working group included a wide range of stakeholders, including CEC members, PEP members, union leaders, advocates, parents, and elected officials. The working group published a report in November 2022 to make recommendations to the Chancellor for changes to the formula, which he considered and determined a few recommendations to move forward with. We will be discussing those changes in this presentation shortly. In addition to recommendations to change the formula, the working group also asked that we work intentionally to better engage the community about school budgeting, the fair student funding formula, and how money to schools is allocated within this formula. This presentation marks a shift in our approach and demonstrates our commitment to the recommendations of the working group to focus on our transparency and community engagement. Please note that the CEC presentation for tonight's meeting is posted at the link that was just shared, along with translated versions of the deck. The posted version online does not include the District 20 specific slide, since all CECs are doing this presentation before the April PEP meeting. However, we can share the district specific slide with the CEC to share with you all if anyone would like the district specific slide. I appreciate you joining the meeting today, and we'll dive into this presentation. So today I'm going to be discussing 3 main topics. First, I'm going to be sharing an overview of this year's overall New York City Schools budget formula. Can you move back one slide? 2, I'm going to be providing a detailed explanation of the fair student funding formula. And 3, discussing the proposed changes to this fair student funding formula for the 23-24 school year. If you have any questions during the presentation, I'm going to ask you to direct them to the chat. We will have team members ready to respond to these questions. Questions that they are not able to answer during the presentation will be collected and shared with the New York City Public Schools team, who will then respond, and I will share back with the group. Additionally, the intention of this session is to collect public comments on our proposed changes. We ask that if you have specific feedback on the proposed changes to the fair student funding formula, that you please feel free to share that feedback with budgetpubliccomments@schools.nyc.gov, and we'll drop that email in the chat as well. Our New York City Public Schools team will be taking public comments received at this email address into consideration in the coming weeks. Next slide, please. And one final note about the presentation. While I will be providing an overview of our overall New York City Public Schools budget and our district budget, I will not be reviewing our individual school budgets. Those are accessible on our public website. This slide shows you the steps to find the school budgets from our homepage. I will give you a minute to use this information to load your school-specific budget if you are interested. I'm now going to provide an overview of our overall budget and where the funding comes from. Our total budget for the 2022-23 school year is $37.6 billion, or about $31,000 per student in our system. New York City provides most of our funding. For the 2022-2023 school year, the city contributed $20 billion, or 54% of our total budget. Most of our funding from the city comes from what we call city tax levy dollars. City tax levy funds are drawn from local taxes, such as property taxes, sales taxes, and personal income taxes. Every year, the mayor proposes the amount of city tax levy funding we get, and the city council must pass the budget into law. $13 billion, or 36%, comes from New York State funding. New York State is our second largest source of funding. For the 2022-23 school year, the state will contribute $13 billion, or 36% of our total budget. Every year, the governor proposes the amount of state funding that we will get, mainly based on the number and types of students enrolled in our schools, and then the state legislature must pass the budget into law. Funding generally comes from income and corporate taxes, as well as property and sales tax. Federal funding comprises a total of $4 billion of our funding for this school year. The federal government is our third largest source of funding. The federal government gets its funding mainly from income taxes. Every year, Congress proposes a budget and the president must sign the budget into law. The Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, provides the rules for allocating most of the federal funding we receive. For the 2022-23 school year, the federal government will contribute $2 billion, or 5% of our total budget, as well as an additional $2 billion, or 5% of our budget in temporary federal stimulus funding. Next slide. In the previous slide, we covered an overview of where New York City Public Schools receives its funding from, and now we will shift into how that funding is spent in our schools and across our system. The largest proportion of our budget is allocated toward K-12 schools and instruction. We allocate $15.1 billion, or 46% of our overall budget, annually to support our schools, including health and school climate initiatives, special education, and other operating expenses. Most of the instructional dollars, over $15 billion this year, are controlled at the school level. Within our budget, we have mandated costs that must be covered annually, including employee benefits, pension, and debts, as well as state mandated payments to charter schools, non-public, and contract schools. We allocate $2 billion to support early childhood across the city. And finally, our superintendent and field offices and central offices comprise just 2% of our overall budget. K-12 allocations are all dollars given directly to district schools, in addition to associated fringe and pension costs, under the oversight of principals and superintendents. School budgets are used for all instructional expenses at the DOE. $15.1 billion in school budgets pays for costs including salaries and benefits for classroom teachers, classroom paraprofessionals, principals, assistant principals, and deans, and other classroom and school-based staff. This also includes funding for textbooks, computers, materials, and supplies. The school operations section pays for non-instructional services that students receive. The $4.3 billion is used to pay for costs including free breakfast and lunch available to all students, bus routes, loan payments on buildings, which are new construction and renovation, and these are similar to mortgage payments. Non-public and contract school payments cover schools and programs that educate New York City students, but are not directly run by the New York City Department of Education. The $2 billion covers charter schools, students with disabilities attending specialized schools, supplemental services to students attending non-public schools. Employee benefits, pension, and debt. This $10 billion pays for healthcare and other employee benefits, pension payments for staff, and debt payments on loans for school construction and upgrades. Now we're going to look at the financial breakdown for our district. Again, this will not cover the breakdown by schools. You can find that on the New York City Public Schools website by following the directions that we shared at the start of the session. As you can see, in District 20, we have a $549 million budget across 46 pre-K through 12 schools serving 43,180 students, including our pre-K centers. This does not include District 75, since those programs are not funded through fair student funding. School budgets are comprised of a mix of fair student funding and other funding sources. Pre-K centers are not funded with fair student funding. Who decides how the money is spent at the school level? So once this funding is in place within school budgets, principals are responsible for the funds allocated to schools and have a great deal of flexibility in how they spend the funding. These choices are made in partnership with school leadership teams or SLTs. As principals and SLTs create the school's comprehensive educational plan or CEP, they identify school-specific instructional needs and priorities and align the school budget to this plan. Principals work with their SLTs to create the school budget in alignment to the goals and instructional priorities outlined in the CEP. Superintendents like myself supervise all principals in our district through this process and must approve all school budgets and their alignment with the school's CEP. I'll now go into more depth around what fair student funding is. Fair student funding, sometimes referred to as FSF, is the largest funding stream that we provide to schools. As discussed on the previous slide, the allocation of fair student funding provided to schools is based on the number of students enrolled at each school and the specific needs of those students. We make these calculations based on our fair student funding formula, which calculates how we distribute this overall pot of money to schools. Within the formula, students with needs that require more support receive more funding in alignment with those needs. As indicated in previous slides, fair student funding is a significant proportion of school budgets. In fact, these funds account for nearly 2/3 of most K-12 New York City public school budgets. In many cases, schools also receive funding from other funding streams, including federal funding streams like Title I, Title III, IDEA, which is funding focused on special education, or other targeted allocations for specific initiatives. These pots make up the remaining funding within the overall school budgets. As a note, charter schools, 3K and pre-K, and D75 programs are funded outside of the fair student funding formula. Additionally, mandated IEP-related services, including speech teachers, occupational therapists, and physical therapists, as well as one-to-one paraprofessionals, are also funded outside of the fair student funding formula. Again, the money is provided to schools from the fair student funding allocation, provides principals with significant flexibility, working in partnership with their SLTs to utilize the funding to design instructional programs tailored to the needs of their students within the school community. Funding from the fair student funding allocation provides for each school's basic instructional program and classroom services. This funding can be used to pay for classroom teachers, including arts, gym, and cluster teachers at the elementary level, as well as school leadership, guidance counselors, social workers, and administrative and pupil support staff. Additionally, the fair student funding allocation can pay for after-school programs, tutoring and intervention programs, as well as teacher absence coverages and classroom resources and materials. I want to now use this opportunity to further clarify some of what we have already discussed today. Throughout this presentation, I've been talking about fair student funding and the fair student funding formula. When we say fair student funding, we're talking about the pot of money that is allocated to K-12 students from this large pot, not including pre-K centers or D75 programs. This year, the fair student funding pot is $7 billion. The fair student funding formula is the method by which we decide how to allocate that funding to schools. This slide outlines the formula and how we utilize the formula to calculate the total amount of fair student funding that each school receives. I'm going to walk you through how we utilize the formula to determine how much fair student funding each school receives and how we determine that specific dollar amount. So first, off the top, each school in the city receives a foundational amount of $225,000 annually. This is a baseline funding allocation that is provided to every school, regardless of the number of students that the school serves. Next, we add funding for collective bargaining related costs, which is contractual pay increases for school staff. Then we calculate the remainder of the fair student funding by allocating a base amount for each student or per capita, and then allocating additional funding based on each student's identified educational needs and instructional programs. It is in this part of the formula that we take into account the weights that we have been referring to throughout the presentation. On the next slide, we'll dive more deeply into the weights that we utilize to determine the specific dollar amount that we allocate per student, so that you have a clear understanding of what goes into this part of the formula. I also want to pause here to reiterate that within this formula, we take the time to examine the individual needs of each student to determine funding allocations. We make these individualized calculations for each student, aligned to their individual and specific needs and educational program, to determine how much funding would be provided to that school for each student. Now, to deeply understand the current weights that we use to calculate that last part of the formula from the previous slide. So on this slide are the fair student funding weights for the current school year, 2022-2023, or fiscal year 2023. Here you can see the different types of weights that students can be eligible to receive based on their instructional needs or academic programs. Again, these are the weights for this current year. In previous slides, we mentioned that the Fair Student Funding Working Group has made recommendations for changes to the Fair Student Funding formula. This is the area where they made recommendations for changes. Later in this presentation, we will show a very short, similar chart that indicates weight changes that we are proposing for the next school year, 2023-2024, or fiscal year 2024, made as a result of the work of the Fair Student Funding Working Group. Now, I'll explain the different weights on this slide. For 2022-2023, the base weight of 1.00 was equal to approximately 4,197 per capita or per student. This per capita is adjusted annually to reflect changes in the citywide average teacher salary. The basic grade weight is allocated to schools for all students on their audited or October 31st register and is calculated by considering instructional programming requirements by student grade level with distinct weights for K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12 grades. So why does 6 to 8 have a heavier weight than high school grade bands? The elementary school weight is set at the primary weight of 1.00, and it serves as the starting point for the calculation of all the subsequent fair student funding weights. Middle school students carry the largest weight due to the evidence of large drop-off in student achievement and greater average social emotional needs, as well as higher teacher cost factors. As middle school teachers are entitled to a preparation period and a professional or administrative activity period, 1.4 middle school teachers are needed to cover each class, compared to 1.2 for elementary school classes. High school students in grades 9 to 12 are weighted at a slightly higher level than grades K to 5 for several reasons. Older students tend to have higher costs for non-personnel, such as more costly science materials. They often take electives that break into smaller classes, and their schools often require more administrative personnel. This approach is consistent with our historic funding practices and with practices in other cities. Funding for academic intervention, or AIS, is determined by student academic performance when they enter a school, using test scores from their prior year. For students where students do not have incoming test scores in the lower grades, such as before students begin taking tests or if they do not have prior test scores, we provide funding based on a student's poverty level. Funding for special education is determined by the percentage of time students spend receiving special education services. For example, we have one weight for students receiving services for less than 20% of their week, another weight funding students receiving part-time services for up to 59% of their week, and a final weight for students receiving full-time special education services. These special education weights are then also broken out by student grade level with the specific weighting value, again, determined based on the cost of providing the instructional program. We also provide supplemental funding that supports students who have been declassified as special education students. This funding supports students in their first year transitioning out of special education services through the post-IEP transitional support weight. Funding for English language learners is allocated based on student grade level, reflecting mandated instructional services, including bilingual and ENL instructional programming. Additionally, we have weights for former Ls who have achieved proficiency within the past 2 years, indicating using the state designated term commanding. We also provide funding for Ls with students with interrupted formal education or CEC status. Students with this classification receive their respective L weight in addition to the CEC weight. We also have another category of weights for portfolio high schools. These weights are provided to schools based on the number of students who are involved in these academic programs within each high school. Career and technical weights have different tiers based on the type of career preparation program. Programs that require more resources such as nursing, agriculture and veterinary, aviation technology, automotive, culinary, etc., require industry-specific equipment, higher level of consumable supplies and materials, student internship requirements that are integral to the program of study, and highly specialized and ongoing industry training for teachers, have higher weights to support that instructional programming. There are also separate weights for students in specialized academic or specialized audition schools and for students attending transfer schools. Only students attending high schools are eligible for these weights. Excellent. We just took a look at all of the weights that students could be eligible to receive within the Fair Student Funding Formula allocation. I also shared that as we are calculating that formula for each school, we take into account the instructional needs of each individual student within the school as we determine schools' overall budget allocations. In this slide, we'll take a look at how each student's calculation is determined. The different types of weights are indicated by color in the upper right corner of the slide. In order to determine the weight for each student, we evaluate their eligibility for the weight based on data in New York City public school systems that store key information about students. Now, we're going to walk you through the process for how fair student funding would be allocated for 2 students, Sam and Alex, through the Fair Student Funding Formula. Sam and Alex are 2 students who attend an elementary school in our district. The orange section shows the grade weight that they first receive. Because they are elementary students, they are both entitled to the K-5 grade weight of 1.0, again, shown in the graph in orange. If they were middle school students, they would have a weight of 1.08. And if they were high school students, they would receive a weight of 1.03. Now, both Sam and Alex are classified as English language learners, or ELLs, shown in green. Sam is an elementary school multilingual learner enrolled in a standalone English as a new language, or ENL program. Therefore, Sam is entitled to the K-5 ENL weight of 0.40. Alex is also an elementary school multilingual learner. Alex is enrolled at a bilingual program at his school. The school has appropriately coded Alex as enrolled in a bilingual program in the New York City Public Schools scheduling system, STARS. As such, Alex is entitled to the K-5 bilingual weight of 0.44. Both students are students with disabilities, requiring special education classroom instructional services, such as special education teacher support services, or SETS, special class, or integrated co-teaching, or ICT. So Sam's individualized educational program, or IEP, requires less than 20% of Sam's instructional program to be in an IEP setting. Therefore, Sam is entitled to the less than 20% special education weight of 0.56, which is shown in yellow. Alex's individualized education program of 21% to 59% of Alex's instructional program to be spent in an IEP setting. Therefore, Alex is entitled to the between 21% and 59% special education weight of 1.25, shown in yellow. Both students are students in poverty, therefore they are entitled to the Fair Student Funding Academic Intervention weight of 0.12, shown in blue. When you add all the pieces together, Sam's allocation through the Fair Student Funding formula would total a weight of 2.08, while Alex's allocation total 2.81. Because each weight of 1.0 is equal to $4,197, Sam's weight of 2.08 is equal to approximately $8,600, while Alex's weight of 2.81 is equal to approximately $11,800 under the Fair Student Funding formula. Next slide. And now that we've gone into great depth on the overall New York City Public Schools budget for the current school year, as well as the current Fair Student Funding formula, I'm going to review what is ahead for the next fiscal year of FY24, which aligns to the 2023-2024 school year, or next year. So there's some common misconceptions around the Fair Student Funding formula and how it allocates resources to schools and students. Our analyses show that by and large, Fair Student Funding formula is very effective at directing more resources to students that have greater needs. As noted on the slide, through the Fair Student Funding formulas, our schools with the highest share of students in poverty receive 26% more per capita funding than our schools with the lowest share of students in poverty. Further, our analyses show that similar patterns exist for schools with students in temporary housing, students with disabilities, and English language learners. And while our data shows that the way we calculate Fair Student Funding allocations through the Fair Student Funding formula is equitable, next slide, please. We do believe that improvements can be made to the Fair Student Funding formula. As discussed briefly earlier in the presentation, in summer 2022, the Fair Student Funding Working Group was formed in response to Chancellor Banks's request to examine the Fair Student Funding formula and make suggestions for improvements to it. Over the course of 4 months, the group worked in partnership with national experts and our New York City Public Schools team to analyze and identify a series of recommended changes to the formula, as well as aligned policy recommendations. The working group was tasked with reviewing and making recommendations related to the Fair Student Funding formula, including the categories, types of students, grade levels, and weights within the formula, in order to best meet the needs of students citywide while keeping equity at the core of the work. The working group published a report with recommendations for changes to the formula in November 2022. All of the working group's materials, including the presentations, meeting minutes, and the final report, are available on our website at the link provided in the chat. The Fair Student Funding Working Group published a report with recommendations for changes to the Fair Student Funding formula, as well as policy recommendations for how New York City Public Schools could improve Fair Student Funding overall. As a note, some of the public materials published by the working group shared that in some of the modeling, that districts would lose funding as a result of some of the proposals. In our implementation of these new weights, districts and schools will not lose funding as a result of these new weights. Moving forward, the Chancellor has accepted and is proposing 2 changes to the Fair Student Funding formula, which I will now discuss. We are first proposing to add a students in temporary housing weight to the Fair Student Funding formula. This weight would provide additional funding to schools for students who are identified as students in temporary housing. This marks a significant shift in how we allocate resources to our students, with this specific focus on supporting students who reside in temporary housing. This will have an impact on our asylum-seeking families who are living in temporary housing, providing additional resources to the schools who are taking them in. This was the top recommendation from the Fair Student Funding Working Group and is expected to drive $45 million in funding, impacting students in temporary housing across all 5 boroughs. We will better understand how much funding we will be receiving in our district by late spring when initial allocations are released. Secondly, we're proposing to add a concentration weight to the Fair Student Funding formula. The concentration weight would add additional funding to schools with high populations of students with significant needs. Research shows that schools that serve higher concentrations of students with high needs, such as students in poverty, students with disabilities, English language learners, etc., require additional resources to provide robust education and appropriate resources and supports to their students. This weight is expected to drive $45 million in funding to schools in all 5 boroughs and would impact over 300 schools across the city, serving the highest concentration of our neediest students. We will better understand how much funding we will be receiving in our district by initial allocations, which come later in the spring. The concentration weight includes factors for proposition of students who are in poverty. Consistent with the working group's suggestion that we look at poverty in our weights, students with disabilities and students who are in temporary housing and other indicators. In addition to changes to the weights outlined in the previous slide, the Chancellor has also accepted additional recommendations from the working group. So moving forward, New York City Public Schools will be prioritizing budget appeals process to be responsive to special education programming. Throughout the engagement sessions, the working group shared the critical need for schools to receive funding for all of the programmatic needs of students with disabilities in a general education setting. Understanding that there are changes to special education programming that may be impacted by changing enrollment at schools, we will be prioritizing supporting small schools and schools with high proportions of students with disabilities in the budget appeals process. While this was not a recommendation in the working group's final report, we heard this as a significant issue from many members of the working group and wanted to be responsive to the needs of the group. We will be working as a system to increase our transparency around school budgets. We also heard concerns over a lack of transparency and understanding in how we fund schools, how the formula works, and what funds are available at the school level. We are taking steps to address this by being more thoughtful around how we present information to the public and ensure that through presentations and on our website, that information is more accessible to all stakeholders, including making significant changes to presentations like this one. So in order to decide on which recommendations to choose, we carefully considered the recommendations of the working group and looked closely at the impacts of each recommendation. The working group was clear with their values, that we have more work to do with direct funding to our schools with the greatest needs. We selected these proposals by balancing the values of equity and stability, looking to direct additional resources towards our schools and students with our highest needs, while ensuring that schools do not see disruptions to existing resources. As a note, schools will not lose money as a result of these proposals. We are not reducing any weights to schools to fund this proposal. So this chart, similar to the one shown earlier, now includes the proposed new weights for next school year. What is listed here in the blue highlighted section in the top right-hand table are the proposed changes to the Fair Student Funding weights for the next school year. That means, if approved by the Panel for Educational Policy in April, these new weights will be used to calculate the school's Fair Student Funding allocation for the 2023-2024 school year. If approved by the PEP, there is no impact to the current school year budgets. New weights would be calculated and impact schools' budgets by initial allocations for fiscal year 2024 or the school year starting in September. And now here's our timeline for moving forward. In February and March, given initial budget estimates of city and state revenue, New York City Public School superintendents present the CECs with the proposed Fair Student Funding weights for the coming school year. That's this presentation. In April and May, the Panel for Educational Policy votes on the proposed Fair Student Funding weights for the coming school year. In late spring, New York City Public Schools will release budget allocations to schools. In June, principals, along with their school leadership teams, propose budgets for the coming year. And then in July, I and my team will certify alignment between school budgets and comprehensive educational plans, or CEPs, for the coming school year. And then in September, the new school year begins. All public comments will be reviewed by the New York City Public Schools teams. So public questions and comments related to the Fair Student Funding Formula will be posted on the Panel for Educational Policy website. Analysis of each relevant question and comment will be available for review on the Fair Student Funding website in advance of the April 28th vote. Comments and questions may be directed to the following email address or phone number by April 18th, 2023. We're dropping that email address, which is budgetpubliccomments@schools.nyc.gov, and phone number of 212-374-6754. I really thank everybody for your time and attention through this presentation. Please thank you in advance for sharing questions throughout the presentation in the chat and soon in public comment. We will be gathering any unanswered questions and sharing back responses within a few days. And if you have any additional questions that I can support in answering, you can reach out to me at dpreto@schools.nyc.gov. Thank you again.
Great, thanks, David. So for this, we'll now have a few minutes. We'll now have a
Just keep David unmuted. Oh, good.
So we'll now have a few minutes of comment just on fair student funding. If there's anyone in the meeting who would like to speak on fair student funding, we'll adhere to our usual rule of 3 minutes per speaker. We don't have a separate form for that, but if you'd like to speak, just indicate that in the chat.
So Steve, can I ask a question?
Absolutely, Elizabeth. And council members are more than welcome to speak as well.
Oh, I just want to ask 2 questions. So how are merit-based classes funded in the elementary and middle school level? Just curious to know about that.
Can you be more specific about merit-based classes?
Like gifted and talented programs, or like the merit-based classes, like gifted and talented programs.
So I'm going to review after the meeting if any specific place in the Fair Student Funding Formula there exists a specific category weight for gifted and talented elementary school. But through the presentation, I didn't reference anything.
Yeah, because that's
regarding
on high school level.
That's correct. Yeah, the specialized programming was specialized programming, kind of what you were describing, was specific to high school.
Okay. And
but we've definitely marked down that question.
also, and where does the CEC budget comes from? Also from the central administrative costs? Like to do these presentations, where does this money come from?
That's a good question. We've noted it down. We'll definitely get a response to you. I did not have that in specific in the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Kevin Zhao, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, a quick question. We know the budget now, but how do we know those money are spent? For example, like how much is it for salary, for teachers' salary? How much for an after-school program? Do we have the number for that?
Kevin, can you hear?
Do we have an actual number in the future or planned?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Put up your audio.
My audio. My bad. Kevin, I'm sorry.
Can you guys hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Okay. So the question I have is, we have budget, but do we break down into more detail, like how much is it for teachers' salary, how much is it for after-school program and such, or administration? And do we have those actual number from the past years?
So Kevin, I'm just going to repeat your question because I don't think everyone was able to hear it. So if I heard your question correctly, you're asking, is there information on more specific allocations for categories like teacher salaries, paying for after-school programs, etc.
Yes, that's, yeah.
So the more specific information is contained for an individual school budgets. So if you want to view any school budget in the city, you can, we've dropped the links in the chat, and we're displaying the slide that kind of gives the information about how to go about accessing school budgets from the DOE website, and you can view school specific budgets would give information like that, because it's going to be specific to the school.
I see. But do we have a summary on the city level? I know each school have their own budget to break it down, but do we sum up on the city level?
The city level is what I just presented. That is the summary for how it operates on the city. And we've also inserted a slide that describes how that summary breakdown occurs in District 20 schools, which is inclusive of pre-K through 12. So that summary breakdown of budget, I know that we primarily discuss and deal with community school district, which is pre-K through 8th grade. That budget breakdown on the District 20 slide includes high schools that reside within District 20.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, quick question. Hi, it's Maya. So any financing related to the school performance? So, you know, the schools that perform better rewarded somehow, or the other way, the best performing schools are punished for performing better. So, you know, if you have more underperforming students, you get more money, and then you have less underperforming students, you have less money. So if you transfer students into the bucket of, you know, well performing, then you will be losing financing, right? That's how I read it.
I'm not sure if that was a question, but I think I'm hearing that. I'm hearing that. Is there I can just say that there is no weight or category in the Fair Student Funding formula that is tied directly to student performance or student outcomes. The Fair Student Funding formula is driven by category weights that are tied to student demographics when they enter the school or enter into the classroom, including their status as whether or not they're a student with disability, whether or not they're an English language learner, or a student in temporary housing. But it does not connect funding to a student's performance or outcomes within that school. So no, a school is not punished for students performing well.
Okay, thanks.
Academic need, though, if the students are in academic need and that number goes down, they'll receive money.
Yeah, there was a category I remember on that page. It was something about, I mean, it was not performing, but it was, remember you said that if there is no testing available, then, you know, poverty level is the guide, but it was not called poverty level, it was called academic something, right? Steve, remember that was on the upper left corner of the page.
Academic need.
The the funding for academic intervention.
Yeah, so that actually reflects the need for, like, we say performance, but that's academic intervention, and, you know, the way it's formulated is basically, you know, the child needs more work, more intervention, more attention from the teacher, whatever that is, but that has to do with the school performance, right? If you go back, I think if you go one more page back. Yes. Oh, see, academic intervention. So there is.
I just want to understand. So I understand how you're reading that weight.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that basically, if you have student that was needing academic intervention, and now the student is moved to a category when the student does not need academic intervention, then this funding is taken away from school, basically, right?
The additional funding for academic intervention pays for the need for academic intervention, the additional support. So if the additional support is no longer needed for intervention, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Vito
Thank
has,
you.
Yeah. So David, so academic intervention, how is that defined? That wasn't my real question, but following up on that, then I have other questions.
I'm sorry, Vito, I'm trying to find the microphone on my computer so I can project your question. So the question was, what defines academic intervention?
Yes.
Is that me? Because I think I cannot hear anything in.
So the academic intervention is determined by students' academic performance when they enter the school using test scores from the prior year, and schools where students do not have incoming test scores, the funding is based on the student's poverty level. That's for the funding for academic intervention.
So Dave, so now it's kind of like college scholarship, sort of, isn't it? So you might have academic intervention stacked with a poverty level, stacked with children in temporary housing, right? Those will be all separate pots of money that could be put onto one child, a poor child. Is that correct?
More or less, yes. They could be added on to the base weight.
So my question, so taking an individual child or an individual group of children in a school, and they have all of this additional weight, so all of this additional money, where does that money doesn't really go to the specific child, it goes to the school. Is that correct, sir?
The allocations for each student are then provided to the school in an overall allocation. So yes, the allocations, like the funding doesn't arrive to the school in individual amounts. It comes in to allocations over the course of the year.
So now, David, so my real question is this. So that was just the background. So is there anything to follow these children to making sure that they're getting specific needs met, these kids in poverty, these kids in temporary housing, and follow them year to year to see specific interventions and how they're working for those children, either less poverty overall or better school performance, and specifically maybe putting them to the top of the line for things like NEI program or an after-school program and summer rising program. Is anything like that possible, or is it in practice?
I think the short answer is yes, it's in practice. That is the type of thing that we do at the school level. Principals all the way down with their teams is exactly that, to identify students and connect them to additional services and interventions, both mandated and determined by the principal based on the need of the students. So,
right, but like on summer rising,
so
those children are not going to the head of the line.
So if your statement was, for summer rising, the students who are in most need are not going to the head of the line. Am I restating that correctly?
Yes, you are, sir.
Okay. Do you want to add a question on top of that so we can mark it?
So that's a factual question. They're not. So they still have to sign up, and they have to knowingly sign up and get online and use a computer. So could there be a way to put those children? Well, first of all, anybody who wants to go to summer rising should be able to. Let me throw that out there. But is there a way to get them to make sure that if they want that program, those families, that they could get it before kids that are not pretty or temporary housing or academic intervention?
So the question is, can the DOE put in place a kind of priority application for summarizing for students with higher needs?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just repeating so we're marking it down correctly. I have your question, and we're going to be forwarding it on to the DOE.
Thank you, David.
Kevin, Kevin, can I see that, David?
Yeah.
Kevin, is your hand still up from before, or do you have a new question?
I have a question, Patricia.
Go ahead, Kevin.
So it was it was triggered by the other question we have. I know that we don't punish in the school that do not perform well, but do we reward the schools and especially the teachers, principals, if the school is outperforming?
Kevin, can you just ask the question one more time so I make sure I understand it correctly?
So, question actually is, I know that school have a need, and we don't really punish the school that is not performing well. Now, my question is, do we reward the school, the teachers, the principals, if the school is outperforming to the other school, to the above other schools?
What do you mean by reward and punish?
Well, do we give them more budget, or do we give them a bonus to the teachers, principals?
So the question is, do we reward schools that perform well with additional money, like bonuses for teachers and principals? No.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Oh, I wanted to add.
Go ahead, Elizabeth. Yeah.
Because I was going to another CEC meeting and they were talking about Metro cards, like the school is responsible for Metro cards. But I feel like maybe you should add it into the budget because with Metro cards for giving out to students, they get, it's more equitable because then they could go to other districts or places to get more programs, especially for middle school and high school.
So we do provide Metro cards to students based off of the distance from which they live from the school. And we distribute them to students.
Yeah, but see, a lot of parents are asking if you could extend the Metro card time, like for because sometimes we have Saturday programs, and sometimes they have sports programs. Sometimes they live close, but they don't get an extra Metro card. Mm-hmm. But they do the sports, and sometimes it's hard for them to do the after-school programs because they're not going to get a Metro card, and they can't freely travel to wherever they want, where the programs are.
Yep, I've heard this question, I think, this week. The question is, can we extend the usage time on the Metro card to nights, weekends, additional?
And give it to more kids also.
Got it.
Because then kids could travel more better without, especially if they join the after school, the Saturday programs or sports program.
So we're definitely gonna forward that question to the DOE regarding the budget and also to the Office of Pupil Transportation, who's like directly responsible for distributing the Metro cards.
I feel like the Metro card shouldn't be part of this, like the principal have to take care of it. I think it should be a DOE issue.
And it's not. So that's a great question. So the Metro card is not tied to the school budget. Metro cards are delivered to schools. They are separate and apart from a school's budget.
Okay.
They're allocated to the schools first based off of the students and how far they live from the school. But long story short, Metro cards are not tied to a school budget. They're separate.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Kevin, I still see your hand up. Is that you?
No, I'm sorry. I forgot to put it down. Thanks.
I'm going to make a couple of comments on this and have a couple questions. Can't have this conversation without going back to something that was actually shown in here, which is $31,000 per student. And that's the most in the entire country. And that needs to be known because effectively what's happening here is the DOE is now asking us for more money. $90 million, they're not using the net zero funding model, so it's $90 million coming from us, parents. And David went through the different ways that it gets paid for. And I have to emphasize this is not just parents who are quote unquote wealthy parents. These are taxes that get levied on businesses and real estate throughout the city that makes it so expensive. And so I really think the conversation needs to be, it really needs to be about why is this extra $90 million going to have some kind of material impact? Again, we spend the most in the entire country on education per student. I'm going to ask some of these questions, and I realize, David, you weren't part of the working group, and I don't know how much knowledge you have of it, but The whole premise of is the fair student funding formula broken? It's been defined over and over as moving more money towards certain groups, moving more money, but there's nothing about effectiveness on learning outcomes. And you just mentioned that a couple minutes ago yourself. And that's a huge problem, is we're not actually looking at what we spend and is it being spent effectively. You know, it's the equivalent of saying, all right, well, the car is broken, but instead of opening the hood and trying to figure something out, we're going to just pump more gas into it and let's see what happens. The working group had one member who was considered expert in national school finance, and her work was not shown in the final recommendations. So I have a whole problem with the entire sort of premise that the working group used, and of course with these recommendations, they're arbitrary, right? If we knew that it was going to help kids, that would be a different thing, but there was no statistical study done, there was no time series analysis done. New York has had the fair student funding formula for over a decade now. There's data there that it could have been looked at to see how it was working and if it had an impact, do different changes impact learning outcomes. But none of that was done. Just a couple quick questions. David, there's mention to research, slide 14, references made to research. Can you please ask the DOE what research is that? How were the new weights determined? Why is it 0.12? Why? Is it arbitrary? Concentration weight. It overlaps with a lot of categories. It overlaps with academic need. It probably overlaps with English language learners. It overlaps with students with disabilities. If the system isn't changed to work better, we're just putting more gas in the gas tank of a car that's not running. And so the concentration weight, I don't think they studied whether there's multicollinearity, meaning the variables all influence each other and don't actually increase the predictive outcome. So I'd like to know, how are the weights decided? What was the research that is referenced on slide 14? And did they test for multicollinearity in the deciding on the concentration weight? And if they had their experts on school finance, like everyone tells us, those things would have been done, but I don't believe they were. Are there any other questions or public comments? Public comments too on the Fair Student Fund, or can we move on? See, there's one comment in the chat. I'll just read the comment in the chat, considering that it's a comment. Not sure if this applies now to budget, but is the contract with vendors analyzed compared to like a survey? I think DOE wastes a lot of money for food kids are not eating. During COVID, SNAP types cards were given to parents for food kids didn't eat. Is there a survey to analyze if those contracts should continue? Do you want to try that one, David?
I don't have it. I mean, we're marked on that question.
Okay, it's entered. Wow. Okay. Thank you, speaker, for your comment. Okay, I think if there's no other comments, we can probably move along in the meeting. Thanks, David, for presenting that. I know it's a requirement and a lot of reading, but thank you for bringing it to us. And I learned a thing or two listening to it too. So, okay. Let me just go to our next up. We have presentation from Office of District Planning and Office of School Design. Julianne, are you there?
Yep, we're here.
Hey, Julianne, sorry about the delay. We opted to put in a public speaking comment on fair student funding after the presentation. So apologize for keeping you waiting.
No problem. And we have quite a big group here. So I'm actually going to turn it over to my colleague Tasnim to start and share her screen, and we will all introduce ourselves and get started.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Just give me 1 second to share my screen. Yes. All right. Can you all see it?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, all right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to attend this CEC 20 meeting. Today, we are here with Office of School Design to share some information regarding new elementary and middle school buildings opening in CEC 20 in the 24-25 school year. We would like to start by introducing ourselves. Max, do you want to go first?
Hi, everyone. My name is Max Familian. I work on citywide planning strategy in the Office of District Planning. Thanks for having me tonight.
Thanks, Max. And I'm Shahrukh Tasneem. I'm the Director of District Planning for Brooklyn South. Julianne?
Hi, everyone. I'm Julianne. I'm also from District Planning, supporting with planning in Brooklyn South. And I will turn it over to our colleagues in the Office of School Design.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Daniela Phillips, and I'm the Senior Executive Director of the Office of School Design. Both Office of School Design and Office of District Planning are within the same division, and our Deputy Chancellor is Dan Weisberg. Jackie. I'm not sure if Jackie's mic is working. Jackie.
Oh, sorry, I was still muted. Hello, everybody. My name is Jackie Lee. I'm Senior Director of School Design, and I'll pass it to my colleague, Brian Glover.
Good evening, CEC, D20 friends. I'm Brian Glover, Director of School Design with the Office of School Design.
Thank you. So I'm just going to move on to our agenda today. So for the Office of District Planning part of the presentation, we wanted to go over the planning process for new building. We're going to talk about the seat need in CEC 20 and the new buildings that will be opening to meet some of that need. We also wanted to share some brief information about the rezoning process, which is implemented to support educational access and learning condition for our students. I just wanted to mention that we'll take questions at the end of the presentation. So kindly hold on to all of your questions. We are happy to answer them once we finish the presentation. And we have also shared the slides with CEC 20. So if you want to revisit the information presented today, you are welcome to do so. So let's move on. Office of District Planning partners with school communities, CECs, district superintendent, other DOE offices, and additional stakeholders to assess district needs and priorities and develop strategic planning to address them. For today's presentation, we are going to focus on rezoning in partnership with CEC and new school and new programming. Daniela?
Thank you. I wanted to just mention quickly that you may have heard of Imagine NYC Schools. Before the pandemic, we excitedly launched this initiative as a creative way of empowering communities to really think about what's needed in your community and design new schools, new programs, new models for your community. It paused over the pandemic. We are happy to be reintroducing new schools at this time, opening 7 new schools, for example, in 2023. But the reason I wanted to mention Imagine NYC Schools is we are not architects. When we talk about design, we're not designing the school in terms of what the building is going to look like. There are very qualified expert folks who do that. We're working with superintendent, community, parents, teachers, and students to imagine the kind of school, culture, organization, curriculum that you will have as part of your school program. So that's what we mean by imagining and reimagining school.
Thanks, Daniela. Now we are moving on to the new school process. ODP, OSD, and superintendents partner to support the development of new schools in new DOE buildings, which includes deep collaboration with CSCs like you, we also collaborate with potentially impacted schools and other community stakeholders. Here we have shared a general timeline on this slide. We are not going to get too much into the details. Today we are here to introduce the new buildings more formally to you all. We wanted to work together to determine the basic admission structure for each new school this spring, so that we know where we are, what we need to pursue, and if we need to pursue a rezoning plan, which could be proposed and approved in June or in the fall, depending on where we are in the planning process. We also want to mention that CEC votes on rezoning, and that we will discuss this process in more details later in the presentation. Now I'll ask OSD to share more about their process. I'm sorry, I have a few more slides to go before I can, I can give the floor to OSD. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the.
Can we go? Sorry, can we go right back to the timeline slide, just so
Yes.
Danielle, I want to make sure you have a chance to share your portions of that slide.
Oh, thank you. I just want to highlight, if you can see down where it says summer, fall 2023, really early summer, we're going to be coming back to you because we will ask for Superintendent Preto and your CEC to pull together a representative multi-stakeholder design team to think about the new schools that are coming into your district. And what's incredibly important is that we design with and not for, as we're thinking about the kinds of schools, zoned choice schools, science or STEM-based, or the arts, or a combination of all of that. So we really start those conversations in a design team with students, teachers, parents, community leaders sitting together. So look for that this summer. Back to you, Tasneem.
Okay, thank you. Now we are going to talk briefly about the seat needs, the elementary and middle school level seat need in District 20. Across the district, there is a deficit of approximately 1,906 elementary school seats. The elementary schools in District 20 have an average building utilization rate of 111%. This rate is 101% for middle schools. District 20 also has a deficit of 130 K-8 District 75 seats, and the estimated average travel distance to school for kids in this district is among the highest in the borough. I know the CEC is very aware of the overcrowding and situation in the district, and that's why we are very happy to present the new capacities that are opening in District 20 for the 24-25 school year. We are very happy that this will help meet some of the seat needs in the district. So, right now for the 24-25 school year, there is 4 new capacities that's going to open in the district. 2 of them are elementary schools and 2 of them are middle schools. Out of these 4, 3 of these new buildings are anticipated to serve as new schools, and 1 will be a new standalone District 75 site. Now I'm going to, ask my colleague Julianne to share details about each of these new buildings.
Thanks, Tasneem. And before I get into the exciting details about these buildings, we just have one other team member who joined from the Office of District Planning on our analytics team. So just want to give him a chance to introduce himself. Brian.
I'm having some technical difficulties.
It's okay, Brian.
Can you hear me though, at least?
Yes, yes, we
Okay,
can hear
cool.
you. Mhm.
My name is Brian Smith. I work in analytics at Office of District Planning. I currently work with Brooklyn, but I previously supported the Bronx and Staten Island, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Brian. Julianne?
Great. Okay, so the first building that we have here is building K053. This building we have been calling Sunset Park West, and it's located at 6740 3rd Avenue within the current PS 102 elementary school zone. This building has a capacity of about 307 seats and is designed to serve elementary school students. And this building, along with the rest of the buildings we will talk about this evening, are slated to open in the 2024 to 2025 school year. The next building we have here is building K676, which we've been calling the Angel Guardian building. This building is located at 6312 13th Avenue within the current PS 176 elementary school zone. This building has a capacity of about 547 seats, and it's designed to serve an elementary school and elementary school District 75 students. This next building is building K322. We've been calling it Nathan's. This building is located at 650 86th Street within the current PS 104 elementary school zone. This building has a capacity of about 475 seats and is designed to serve a middle school and middle school D75 students. And then the last building we have here is building K464, which is located at 1514 72nd Street. And this building has a capacity of about 132 seats. And this will be a standalone District 75 site. And this is not new construction.
Thank you, Julianne.
I know we went through those kind of quick, so you will have the deck. So after you can take a closer look. So once we have the new buildings, the next big decision point is around admissions and how those schools will admit students. So ODP will partner with the Office of School Design and Superintendents, and we will also collaborate with CECs like you all, along with school communities and other stakeholders to determine what admissions methods will be for the new schools. The DOE for elementary schools has zoned or non-zoned admissions methods. Zoned schools give priority to students who reside in a specific geographic area known as the zone. Non-zoned schools do not have a zone and offer admissions priority to the students who reside in the district, though they can still have a zone program or geographic priority. Different admissions priorities and methods can be considered for these new capacities that are coming online. So if we were to decide that a school would be zoned, that would trigger a rezoning. Rezoning is a much more in-depth process, but just to give you a quick overview this evening, rezoning is the process of changing existing school lines and creating new zones, and it's governed by Chancellor's Regulation A185. The CEC votes on rezoning proposals for their respective community school district. And rezoning can be an important lever for improving educational access and learning conditions. We have an overview here of the timeline for what a rezoning process will look like, which I won't go into too much depth, but just at a high level, once we identify a need, we will have community engagement where we will have conversations with CECs and impacted school communities and other stakeholders to gather feedback to inform new zone lines. We'll analyze enrollment and demographic data to create a proposal for zone line changes that we'll present publicly to the CEC along with the superintendent. There'll be opportunities for feedback and Q&A before the CEC votes after a proposal is submitted within 45 days.
Thanks, Julianne. There are also slides here, where we kind of identify where the new buildings are going to be. There's 2 different maps for elementary school zones and middle school zones for you to review if you are interested after the presentation. As I mentioned, the deck is available and shared with the CSC. So now I'm going to ask Daniela and her team to talk about the school design process.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it to Brian in just a second. First, I just want to say we're going to be using some terms that are a little bit different. They're unique to the new school process because ultimately it's not a school until it until it opens its doors and students come in. But we have to act as if it's a school by doing all of the steps of hiring a school leader and teachers and staff. So Brian's going to start with the first piece about that intended school leader.
Thank you, Daniela. Yes, the first step is getting a school leader that will lead the design work and get that school ready and up and running for a solid, clean opening in September of 2024. That begins with the superintendent identifying a proposed new school leader. And at this point, they are called the acting principal assigned project director. And this is months before the school actually opens. In July of 2024, the superintendent will nominate what's known as an interim acting principal. And that will happen after the new school is approved and it's registered with the New York State Education Department. It is typical, though not guaranteed, that the acting principal assigned project director becomes the interim acting principal. And then once the school is up and running, we go through the Chancellor's Regulation C30 process, where it's a collaborative process with the community and the Department of Education, and we appoint an official principal to the school. And that process, again, begins after the school opens.
And before we go to the next slide, sorry, if you can go back for one quick second, we often get the question, why don't we start the C30 now or the year before so that the community can be brought in to select that intended school leader? And just to clarify, with a C30, you've got to have representation by a UFT, by school leadership team members, by PTA. None of those bodies and organizations exist until the school opens. So that's why we start with this position really called a project director, who is chosen and selected by the superintendent to be the planner with that design team. But then that formal C30 will kick in and community will be part of that selection to appoint a principal, but that can only happen when the school opens. Brian, next one.
The new school acting principal assigned project director will begin meeting 1 to 2 times a month with other new school leaders. So they will participate in the new school residency, which exposes the new leaders to a variety of promising practices that exist across New York City public schools. That can include things like project-based learning, dual language programs, international schools, international baccalaureate schools, CTE programs, and our brand new STEAM centers that are opening up. The acting principal assigned project director gets one-to-one leadership support, and they will go through the process to complete the instructional and operational deliverables, all the things that need to be in place to make sure that the opening is successful and as smooth as possible. And the acting principal assigned project director is expected to begin January 1st of 2024. Getting my years right.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Daniela.
I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about teachers and staff at the new school. We're very familiar with existing schools where there's often hiring committees that interview potential staff. When you have a school that's opening, you don't have staff yet. You don't have folks to serve on that committee. So the UFT, the teacher's contract, has Article B, which specifies the hiring process for all new schools in New York City. We call that process the 18D process. In 18D, it specifies that the hiring committee for a new school will be composed of that project director that the superintendent appointed. That person will be the hiring manager, as well as 2 UFT members designated by the UFT president of New York City, as well as 2 designees of the superintendent. That will be the hiring committee to choose the teachers, counselors, staff positions to open the school. Postings are vetted by the UFT, postings for any position. The job description, the criteria, the qualifications they all go online, and they open up as part of New York City's open market transfer period, which is typically from April until August of each year. So that's when the hiring would happen for the new school, following these guidelines of 18D. Casman, next one. A little bit more about 18D. That committee selects applicants and conducts interviews. They reach consensus about the offers to be made, and it's ultimately that project director that makes the offer, presuming that that project director will turn into the principal. And then just a quick note about school size. When a school has serves 250 students, a special allocation. I know you were talking about fair student funding and budgets. There is a special allocation that comes in for a parent coordinator, which is part of the DC 37 contractual union to serve a school of that size. All right, we're going to shift from staff hiring in 18D to funding for new schools. First, I'm going to talk about public funding and then private funding. There are two main streams of funds that support new school development. The first is, actually I'm going to go to the second one since we've been talking about the project director, the person who's intended to become the school leader. When we say that that project director is going to be working full-time on the planning, design, development, student recruitment, all the actions connected to opening a new school, that takes time. And so typically the person in that role is a sitting assistant principal somewhere, or maybe even a principal who's dreamed of opening a new school. We send release funds to wherever that person is so that their school can hire a replacement assistant principal so that the project director is available full-time starting on January 1st, 2024, a full 8 months before the school opens.
So
that's the release time for the project director. The other public fund goes towards incremental costs connected to opening new schools. If the school is opening in new construction, then there is no furniture equipment that exists yet. So the school construction authority has a special allocation for ordering all of those materials. If a new school is opening in an existing school, co-located or in an existing building, there's likely furniture there. So the allocation is actually smaller and it goes towards things like textbooks or computer instructional technology, but probably not furniture and equipment. And then private funding, our team will work with the design team in District 20 to see if there's additional private funds. We work closely with the New Schools Venture Fund, as well as with XQ for high schools. So we always try to support new schools with additional funding beyond the Fair Student Funding allocation and beyond these startup funds, because everything is so new and until the school is at scale, there's a lot of costs that require some extra funding. Ready for the next slide. One quick note about naming, because this gets sensitive and sometimes controversial in communities. Until the school opens, sorry, let me start by saying there is a process called the Chancellor's Regulation A860 that determines how schools get named, or in some cases, how schools get renamed. We're going to use a placeholder name until we follow that process. We might just say it's the District 20 Nathan School or the Brooklyn Middle School. Those are not official names. In the spring, summer before the school opens, we apply for a DBN for that number, 20K, and then the number of the school. We apply to the New York State Education Department for that DBN. That's also around the time that we can submit the forms and process for following Chancellor's Regulation A860 to name the school. Very often schools will open with just their DBN, and then as the school develops a Parents Association or a PTA, or as it develops the school leadership team, together the community will come up with, sometimes it's naming after someone very important in the local community. And there's some kind of rules about that, but just a heads up that what you hear us internally calling the school is an internal placeholder name. There's an official process that involves the CEC in terms of naming the school. Next one, please. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to colleagues in ODP.
Thanks, Daniela. So yeah, just want to recap next steps here. So we, in collaboration with Superintendent Preto, with your CEC, and other community stakeholders, will evaluate potential future rezonings and other planning needs related to these new capacities that we discussed this evening. And there will also be many opportunities for additional community conversations. This is definitely just the first of what will be many conversations related to these new buildings opening. And we will continue to engage both with you, your CEC, principals, SLTs, and any of the other impacted school communities. And it can include additional presentations at upcoming CEC meetings and other community forums. Daniela, do you want to take the last one?
Sure, just a quick reminder, something I said earlier, which is we will be working with a multi-stakeholder design team, and we're going to be very busy with District 20 because of the new schools opening, multiple new schools opening. So that will get started sometime late spring, early summer.
Thank you, Daniela. That's the end of our presentation. Like, if you have any question or any feedback to share, we are here.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. Clearly, there's a lot, and one interesting fact, of course, is that there's new elections coming up, and probably most of this is going to be done with a different cast of characters. But some of us might still be around, and so just to kind of, if we can just focus on like immediate next steps, and I think there was a slide in here.
Yes, there is. I'm going to pull it up.
So like, what's the immediate next step in this whole process? Maybe that it would be that spring 2023 section right there, correct?
Yes, like now we are just beginning the planning and discussion about the new buildings with the community. That's like, that's one of the reasons we are here for. And then in spring, like, we are going into determining the admission structure for the new school, if it's going to be a zoned or partially zoned school. And if and as I mentioned, it's a very collaborative process. So if we all together decide that a rezoning is needed, then we start the rezoning planning.
Okay.
And I would just like to chime in, that was really helpful, Tasnim, that I think part of what we want to talk about on a really immediate timeline with you all is the timeline, right? There is a world in which we could, at least aim for a June vote on rezoning. That is a quick timeline. But if there was support from the CEC, superintendent, and school communities to develop scenarios and aim for that, that is possible. Or we can have conversations about sort of what it would mean to do some of the planning now, with realization that we'd have a vote in November, and what it would make sense to accomplish in the shorter term under this CEC, and what it would make sense to wait for. We can't, unfortunately, just like pause the whole process and be like, let's just start in July. That wouldn't give us enough time. So it's sort of like one of those two scenarios, which we'll want to figure that out in the coming weeks.
How many, and this is probably hard to say, but within that spring 2023 section, how many meetings does that represent potentially? Even just a range, a ballpark range to get a sense.
Yeah, so something that we typically do with rezonings, given the sort of complex nature of them, is we typically have a smaller group of CEC members that will meet on a more regular basis. I would say typically every 2 weeks with our team, where we actually like get into the nitty gritty, look at the maps, look at all the enrollment trends, like have more in-depth planning conversations, because those are difficult to have in like a bigger CEC meeting. So I think we'd like to kick that off as soon as possible, and we can kind of talk offline and with superintendent about how to figure out who might be involved in that. I do think it would be, I think we should ideally have a presence at every calendar meeting for the rest of this year. And we'll have to hopefully be a little bit flexible, depending on where we're at in the process, right? So sometimes we might just need to be providing an update at a calendar meeting, and other times we might need a longer meeting. And occasionally we have scheduled special meetings for rezonings if we really do need, if we're in a position where we're showing maps and we need an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours to really go through it all, we wouldn't want to take over your whole calendar meeting. And so we try to schedule special meetings as needed.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Any CEC members, any questions for the ODP OSD?
Hi, it's Maya. I think that, I may have missed something, but I hear repetitive mentioning of community engagement, talk to community, ask community, confirm with community. So I was not like, is there a certain agreed upon definition of what community is, and, or some sort of a process related to, how to engage community, who's going to be a community, because it's such a wide, term.
Yeah, so, community education, if we're talking about rezoning specifically, CECs are the ones that ultimately vote and approve rezonings. And so it's sort of by definition very community focused. We start with individual meetings with potentially impacted schools. We have SLT meetings at every school, often more than one, to make sure that they're aware of what we're considering, where we talk about the potential impact to their school communities. We attend CEC meetings, and I think there have also been other engagement strategies depending on the rezoning, depending on the circumstance. We've engaged with early childhood centers, with daycares, with community boards, with neighborhood groups. I think it really depends on the nature of the rezoning. Some rezonings just by nature are a little bit more straightforward, and folks are really expecting it and supportive of it, and we don't necessarily it's not as necessary to sort of go deeper, go further. However, we often do, and I think one thing that can be challenging with rezonings is that the impacted families are predominantly not in the system yet, which is why we try to target where we can early childhood centers and daycares and community groups that represent families that might have younger students. And we kind of customize that based on the individual scenarios in the community in question. But that is always, frankly, that's always a challenge. So we're always open to ideas to continue to further and improve that process, because it can be tricky. We have a much easier time engaging existing schools.
Thank you.
And Max, if I can just add to that, in terms of the school design, it matters a great deal whether the school is going to be a zoned school or a choice school. Because if it's a choice school, then we need to do a lot more kind of surveying, focus groups, get a sense of what the larger community feels there's a need or a demand for across larger communities, as opposed to if it's very specific, you get a sense within a zone.
Daniela, was that a response to the question in the chat regarding design? I'm not sure if it's okay.
Sorry, that was my question. I was curious as to how the design teams would be selected. Will there be something sent out, an application? Will that be open to people of the district, or is it a private selection?
So I do want to be clear that it is not a school leadership team. It is not intended to serve in that kind of capacity. It's it's really an advisory group to help the superintendent, the CEC, kind of the larger decision makers for the district, help design the schools. And again, I don't mean architecture design, I mean like programmatic curriculum wise, the design of the schools. For us, so we'll be working closely with the superintendent this spring on two things. One is starting to identify potential school leaders to become those project directors, whether those are folks within the district, whether we need to really start to do some looking and searching and getting recommendations from outside. So leadership is one part of it. And then as you're asking about the design is the second part. What kind of a design team is it? Is it a team that goes around to different schools? Do we hold an open town hall? Do we do kind of quick surveying to see what people feel is the need? We'll have to kind of figure out that plan. But because you have multiple schools opening, we first need to get a sense of, are we talking zone schools or choice schools? That's an important piece of the design.
Okay, thank you. The presentation was very informative. Thank you.
Great.
Kevin, I see Maria's question in the chat, but we'll get to Kevin Zhao first, has his hand raised. Kevin?
Yes, I just have one quick question. How do we decide on those locations, the school location that we were talking about before? I'm sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, so the school locations are determined by the school construction authority. So District 20, because of its historical overcrowding and current overcrowding, has had funding to actually build new schools and acquire new school space. And so the school construction authority for many years has been looking to identify real estate where that can happen. And I'm sure some of you have been at presentations or in conversation with them before. It's very challenging to find property that is appropriate and big enough and has the right zoning to build new school buildings. So they are the ones that come to us that says, okay, we have found a site. Here's the site. Here are our options for what we can, what we might be able to do here. And then we work together and collaborate with them and you all to kind of decide what we're going to put in the buildings, but they're the ones that really identify the real estate and the property and the size of the buildings. And there is part of their process that involves coming to CEC and telling you all about that process. And when they identify a space, they have their own public review process. And we're at a stage here where these properties and these buildings were identified years and years and years ago. And we're finally getting to the place where they're near opening, which is why we're having the specific planning conversations about what we would do with the spaces.
Yeah, a couple of things I just want to follow on to that because it does segue to some of the questions in the chat. I personally find the SCA's process really frustrating, unlike what you guys are doing right now. You guys have provided a really nice detailed overview. You're willing to take a lot of questions, answer a lot of the questions. The SCA is extremely opaque, extremely reluctant to share any information until they're good and ready to. And so that's really frustrating, and that needs to be said. And specifically, we just got an announcement that there's going to be a new high school supposedly in Bay Ridge. And some people in the chat are posting about it. So do you guys have anything at this point? Again, this is an SCA announcement, I understand. So, but do you guys have anything? There's a couple of questions in the chat. Are you going to speak about the high school that Councilmember Brannon reported was going to open in Bay Ridge? And two people mentioned that. Is there anything you guys can say about that at this time? Have you been informed of that?
I can take that one.
Yeah, David, you want to take that one?
I can take that one. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So after close discussions, both the Department of Education and the SCA have come to decide to use the Ovington site that we've been speaking about for high school to relieve the significant capacity challenges in some of the high schools in South Brooklyn. The seat count and the timeline are being studied and will be announced when SCA starts the public review as they would with any new site.
Why won't the SCA share how they came to make that decision about that site?
I don't have any comment on how the SCA is communicating.
It's a public meeting and you're a public official. And if the SCA is not going to be here, which they never are, and they're really hard to talk to, I'm going to ask whoever's here. So if you can work anything.
For my part, the advocacy of the CEC and other community members went into the decision behind this site becoming a high school. As far as the SCA's process for communicating, I don't have a comment.
There was another comment in the chat. And again, the commenter, actually, I believe it's Rana from PS30, asking about newly announced construction for elementary school in Ovington between 4th and 5th. That's the site. In the new high school in Bay Ridge, so that's the site. And then Maria Garcia in the chat, we need more middle school options and high school options in the southwest corner. I think this would help larger conversation. The DOE is not pivoting with the needs as they change. It takes a long time to plan and acquire the land. And by the time it comes to pass, the needs have changed. I think this needs to be a larger conversation on control in K-12. So ODP folks and school design folks, do you have any comment about specifically about middle school, high school options in the southwest corner of District 20?
So I don't know exactly the full range of what of the geography specifically that person is referring to. Feel free to chime in the chat or otherwise. I mean, the middle school building that is opening in 24-25 is roughly in that area. I don't know if they mean even further southwest, but I would say that that's southwest K322, which is sort of south of 201 and slightly east of 104. So that is something that is coming to the district. And I think part of the conversation around high school need had to do with, severe overcrowding at Fort Hamilton High School, which is also in the south or west portion of the district. But that's helpful feedback, and we'll continue to push SCA on where they're identifying sites, and continue that conversation. So if there are, we always encourage CEC members, if there are specific and superintendents, if there are specific pieces of land or specific areas that you are interested in having new capacity, like to always let us know. We work closely with the SCA. We will communicate everything with them. They will look at specific sites that if folks bring up, and we, and there is funding, and they will invest. They will investigate. So,
are you the point person for something like that, Max? To send new sites to from your department?
Actually,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Actually, that would be Julianne and me. We will be the first point person for the CEC because we are supporting your district and Brooklyn South.
The idea behind my comment, and Fort Hamilton is overcrowded, but there's many students who travel from the central part of the district Fort Hamilton's fairly out of the way for central District 20. It's all the way on the waterfront, as you know, and it's very inconvenient for a lot of families from the central part of District 20. I believe there should have been a closer look at high school sites in the central part of the district, which is also one of the most immigrant-heavy, lower income parts of the district. So if SCA was here, that's what I would share with them.
If you have any specific building or location in mind, please share those with us, and we'll definitely convey the information with SCA. And like my colleague Max shared, that when this kind of suggestions comes in, they usually look at this building and let us and shares if it is if it's feasible to establish a new building. So please do share the information if you have any other location that you have in mind that could serve the students in your community.
You guys are so much more receptive just with your comments than anything the SCA has ever said to me. So I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Vito, go ahead. You have your hand. Vito, we can't hear you. Still having trouble, can't hear you, Vito. hear him right. You guys can't hear him right. Vito, do you want to type your question? Type it in the chat, or you can always text it to me too. Any other questions in the meantime from, and I guess, let me just circle back real quick. So going forward, there's obviously a lot of you here. Who should be my sort of, again, just, I think you just said Julianne and Tasneem for sort of immediate questions after this presentation. Is that right?
I'm sorry, can you just repeat? Can you repeat what you just said? I'm sorry.
Good. So, any, are you, Julianne, sort of the two primary people we should go to with any questions about next steps, anything that comes up, expecting to hear about next steps?
Yes. Yes.
That's great.
Yes,
Good.
we are. Mhm.
Oh, I want to.
Yeah, go ahead. The question?
Yeah. Where does funding come from? They said, where does funding come from?
You're talking about from the budget
Yeah,
presentation?
yeah, because they said there's they get funding. Private.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing.
There was some feedback. Sorry.
Good. Elizabeth, do you want to ask one more time?
Oh, I was wondering, where does private funding come from?
I think that was one of the new school slides. We had two, if you want to go back to that slide, we had two funding partners that we work pretty closely with. One is called the New Schools Venture Fund, and they support new school designs. Of course, like any private funder, they have criteria for what they'll fund. And so they have different funding cycles that we work with them closely. And then XQ is a different funder. They're interested in high schools exclusively. So the idea is that we, with our public schools, there's public funds, but we also try to supplement on the early part of new school design. Can't promise it, but we would try to find that.
Oh, and where are you finding the interim acting principal pool? Because they're one of the more important people starting the new school. What would you, and
Yes.
Parents have an input on who you're hiring in these new schools?
So parents will for sure be involved in the C30 process, which selects the permanent principal of a school. Because the school doesn't exist yet, we can't call them the principal, so we call them the project director, or that long term of acting principal assigned project director. And that person is selected by the superintendent. It's actually a small DOE group of the superintendent and the chief. And then we have the C30 process later. In terms of where that person comes from, there's obviously state certifications that you need in order to be a leader of a public school anywhere in New York State. And New York City does a lot of recruitment. We have a whole principal hiring pool of folks who've expressed their interest. Typically, and I'll be speaking with Superintendent Preto about this, it's pretty common that within a district there are assistant principals that are kind of on their way to being ready for school leadership at the principal level. So we do a combination of looking internal within the district and also doing recruitment outside to find the best candidates.
Thank you.
Vito, did you log in with a different device, and you can ask your question?
I did. Can you copy now?
Yep. We can hear you, Vito. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So thank you so much. So I know this might not be a a question for you, but I'm hoping you could just maybe provide some information. So the K035 school is a 300 kid school. It's a K-5, so it's 6 grades. Doing the math at 25 kids per class. That's only 2 classes per grade. Is there a policy? Do we have a policy of like maximizing the space and building as big a school as possible? in a space like that? Because, you know, as soon as we put that online, I know that, you know, 2 classes, really, they're going to wind up needing 4 classes. Could you speak to that, or is that strictly at SCA?
So,
Yeah, oh, go
I'm
ahead,
sorry,
Tom.
Max. Okay.
No, go ahead.
So I just wanted to say, like, thank you so much for your question. And like, but for information regarding any specific question, like, we are very happy to like, look into your question and get back to you. Like, your question has like, has some details that we have to look back into our data, and we want to give you the right answer and full answer. So our contact information is here on the screen. If you could kindly email us your question, we are happy to respond. I can also put our contact information on chat if that's helpful.
That'd be great. Thank you, Tasneem.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we've done enough comments on this presentation for now. We have other items to get to. So thank you so much, everyone from ODP and Office of School Design, for being here tonight. And we look forward to continuing to work with you on this really important work.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is Superintendent Dr. Penrose report. Go ahead.
Thanks.
Yep.
So I'm going to give a brief presentation. I thank everybody for their energy and attention through this long meeting. So I will provide an update on our middle of year progress within our academic screeners, iReady, and as I have presented on several times in last CEC meetings, and I will also provide an update for the first time on our Acadience screener, which is our K-2 literacy screener that we use to track and monitor progress in early childhood literacy. So I'll cover first iReady in reading. This chart demonstrates the overall district progress compared to the beginning of year assessment, which was administered in September and early October. This chart refers to students' progress in grades 3 to 8. So we have approximately 25,825 3 to 8 students whose data is reflected in this chart. And you'll see that on the top chart, which says MOI 13-217, that's January 3rd, February 17th. That's the current data. The double green is for students who are achieving above grade level. The solid green is for children who are early or on grade level. Yellow is 1 grade level below or approaching grade level, 2 below, and then far below. So we're seeing the type of progress we'd like to see. The children who are at or above grade level, the percentages are increasing, and the children who are below grade level are decreasing. And we are currently on track or on target to at least meet, based off of the iReady projections, to at least meet our previous year's state exam achievement results across the district in ELA and potentially exceed. So we're really happy about that. And this is data that we use to monitor progress at the district level, at the school level, school-wide, and we also use it at the classroom level and all the way down to the individual student level to set goals, to assign lessons to individual students, small groups of students, entire classes, grade levels, as well as make decisions around the effectiveness of curricular programs, intervention programs, and the like. This is one of our primary go-tos. So to speak to the question earlier before around how do we go about tracking and monitoring it, in District 20, this is one of our primary ways for doing that. So this is the placement of at, above, or below or far below by the reading domains that are measured in iReady. So the first three are primarily more early childhood type indicators of phonological awareness, so the awareness of sounds, phonics, and high frequency words. So those are going to typically be primarily everybody's above grade level because they're primarily early childhood measures. However, we do have children in grades 3 and above who do demonstrate need in these areas. And then the primary areas of vocabulary, overall comprehension, and then literary comprehension and nonfiction comprehension are the primary areas where we're looking in iReady measurement. And as has been in the past year, vocabulary and nonfiction reading are the two areas where we show some of the higher needs and focus our areas of school improvement and focus during our school visits and during our principal meetings. We really look at how we're addressing the teaching of vocabulary and the infusion of grade level nonfiction text across not just literacy, but also the content areas.
Where is nonfiction on this data?
It should be not. Oh, it's cut. It's cut off. It should be at the bottom. It should be right below.
Okay.
I can send you.
Okay, that's okay.
It got cut off in the chat. It's long story short. It is higher in the red than the literature.
Okay.
Is there? Do you see it?
I see is that informational text?
The
That's
informational
the
text.
nonfiction. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Okay.
All right. So that's for reading. The one thing that iReady does not measure is writing, and writing is a key component of several points on the day 2 portion of the ELA exam. So the projections that iReady makes for overall performance on the state exam don't take into account writing. So that's one thing that's missing from this projection.
Should I hold questions till the end, or if there's something on this, go now? What do you prefer?
You can go ahead.
So phonics, right? And again, just big picture, right? There was a big initiative with the DOE, change the way we teach literacy, right? And I forget the two. There's the Teachers College method, and that's out, and an emphasis on phonics is in, right? How has that been? Can you just comment generally on what you're seeing here?
When I get to the Acadian screener, which is the early literacy screener it tests those specific skills only for kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade students.
Okay.
I can get a little bit more into depth on that.
Okay.
But what I can say about this data, the phonics, phonological awareness, and high frequency words, those are going to be the 3 areas that touch upon early childhood literacy that are being tested and tracked on students who are in grades 3 and above. We do see, albeit small compared to the other areas, we do see students in grades 3 and above who demonstrate need in the areas of phonics, a small proportion of phonological awareness, and in high frequency words. So we do have to provide supplemental intervention and support and services to children who are in grades 3 and above in these skills that are primarily taught in the early literacy grades.
Okay, I'll hold my question.
Okay. And then, so here's math. So same setup. We do see a similar pattern of growth across the continuum from on grade and above grade. We do have a smaller percentage of students who are below grade level in math, and we have a higher percentage of students who are at or above grade level in math in the district, a larger band of approaching or 1 grade level below it middle of year. So we are pleased to see improvement, and we are on track based on the projections in iReady to improve upon our overall district percentage at the end of the year in the state exam. We'll know by the time the state exam comes, and we will also administer an end of year diagnostic for students in math and iReady. But according to the middle of the year, we are on track to exceed our overall district percentage of proficiency on the state math exam. Okay. So next I'll go into Acadian. So we haven't presented on Acadians before. So Acadians is the academic screener that, like I was saying before, measures based off of 3 benchmarks over the course of the year, children's progress in foundational literacy. So I've gone by kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. So this is the kindergarten overall for the district, we've assessed a little over 3,000 kindergarten students at the beginning and the middle of the year. And similar idea, the red is intensive need, yellow is, about a little bit behind, green is on track, blue is ahead of schedule. And the difference, while the assessments are similar in that they do assess according to benchmark, where iReady is a computer adaptive assessment, the Acadience assessment is administered one-on-one to students. It is administered digitally, but teachers do administer the assessment to students one-on-one. And that is for really any assessment that you're administering to a child who is at second grade or below. And this particular benchmark, and you'll see the pattern as I move through the first and second grade, the benchmark focus areas shift because at different points in literacy, they set different benchmarks for the things that children should be or they're measuring to master, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. So in kindergarten, at the middle of your benchmark, the Acadian screener looks for three things. So the first, sound fluency, phoneme segmentation fluency, or if the child's ability to see different sounds within, across a pattern of letters, and then the correct letter sound fluency, essentially like being able to identify the right sound according to the letter and the way the letter is presented to them. If it's a blend, like if it's two letters together, like that kind of thing. So that's what is specifically assessed here. So, and you'll notice in this chart that the children, there's the red in the middle of the year is slightly higher than the red was at the beginning of the year. It doesn't necessarily mean that does that make sense? It doesn't necessarily mean that the children are further behind or haven't made growth. It just means that according to the things that are being assessed on this benchmark, they're not, it's because the things that are assessed in the first benchmark are drastically different than these things.
So do they build on each other?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so there is some continuation by the end of the year. It will represent sort of a sum total of a year's worth of instruction in literacy.
That's right.
But just tested a little differently at each point in time.
And in some cases that that continuum can occur over like an entire year or even a year and a half. Some children can make great strides at different junctures of their age. So maybe while they may be far behind in kindergarten, they can make a big jump in first grade. It's not necessarily like a linear and yeah.
It'd be nice if it was just perfect. Every kid, same, like
that would be great.
Right. And can I ask more questions about this before you move on? So for the, you said Acadience, it's given by teachers one-on-one with the kid?
That's right.
Wow. And, but is it using a device or is it? Okay.
Yeah. So the materials and the resources that the children interact with are on a device, and the teachers as well. I mean, there's also some hard materials, but ultimately the assessment is, involves a device, and then the data is entered into the device.
And that high level shift I mentioned a minute ago with the city going away from the old way, this new phonics-based way, does that impact Acadience? Because you've used Acadience for 2 or 3 years now.
This is the second
year, right?
Yeah.
Did that impact? How does that sort of those big picture policy decisions affect what you do at the district level with something like this?
It's a good question. With the assessment itself, it's a shift in terms of how teachers are administering the assessment itself. So assessments, we did not have any schools administering the Acadience assessment prior to last year. Last year was the first year for everybody. So, and because of that, this assessment is administered slightly differently than some other previous early childhood assessments for literacy that we may have implemented. And because of that, some features of the assessment, like some features of the assessment and the way that it's given, like students being timed in their responses or those types of things can shift. So that's something to adjust to, and also needs to be thought of when teachers are engaging children in instruction, like to get them used to how assessments are administered. Right. So that's one thing. And something else is just the types of things that are being assessed shifts as well.
Yeah.
So, for example, with the correct letter sound fluency, there are some assessments that don't necessarily assess for that directly, or aren't, they aren't necessarily highlighted or otherwise focused on in some assessments versus others. So that's another shift.
Okay.
And the most high level shift is that curricular resources that schools use to teach foundational literacy were screened this year by the Department of Education to ensure that all children were being engaged in a foundational literacy program that highlighted phonics. And that's something that we track and monitor.
Okay,
That's
got it.
the biggest one.
Thank you.
So here's first grade. And so you'll see the benchmarks are, there's a little bit of overlap, but where you're moving from the correct letter sound fluency, now we're assessing for whole words read fluency, oral reading words correct, and their oral reading accuracy. So in the first grade, the benchmark assesses these for different areas. And we're happy to see that in first grade, where at the beginning of the year there was a lot of red, we're making headway there. So we're very happy about that. And then finally in second grade, we're measuring at this juncture in the year oral reading fluency for words correct for accuracy. And now it calls for the children to retell the text that they read and measure their accuracy in being able to retell. And similarly, we're seeing a slight increase at this juncture in the year in the red and about the same for the green. So this is something that last year we were focused on progress monitoring our year one of looking at phonics. We were really looking at second grade. We wanted to see by the end of second grade how children were doing. So this year we're looking at all the grades and tracking and monitoring the implementation of foundational literacy curriculum against the Acadians assessment. All right, that was what I prepared for this evening's presentation.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
Council members, any questions on what David just presented? And I do concur, David. I like the data, and I looked last year. We're ahead a couple of percentage points in ELA and math compared to last year's middle of year. I know you know that, but I always like to sort of check these things, and yeah, it looks great. So good job. Any questions, council members, or can we move on? Okay, good chance to move ahead in the meeting. I don't have any, I'm not going to give anything for my president's report. We all know that there's a CEC election, but if you haven't seen an email from your school to sign up for the CEC elections, I'd be shocked. So everyone please check with your school, check online, any number of sources to get information about that. I think we can just go to public comment now before we get to the two resolutions. So Kevin B, is there any, I'll just go over the, am I on camera, by the way, when I'm talking? I'm not, right? Because I'm muted.
Yes, you're on camera.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just go over the rules one more time for signing up for public speaking. We'll give 3 minutes each to speak on any topic. You can use the form. The link has just been posted in the chat one more time. It's also online. And with that, and I will also check with the interpretation lines to see if anyone would like to speak. Hold on one second. Hold on. No. Close the mic. David's muted.
I'm turning on my volume.
What should we do, Sylvia? Are we good?
I turned my volume off and I'm muted.
But
Yeah.
that might be coming
That
through
may come
mine.
from his computer.
Am I audible here? Okay, and then the speakers, they should be coming through here or through that one. Okay, go ahead. So
We have two speakers, Maria and Jacob, but I'm looking in the chat and the representative list, and they're not here. But if they are, maybe a different account.
so I'll ask for them. Maria Garcia, are you still here? And you signed up to speak? Would you like to speak? And what was the other name?
Jacob Goldfinger.
Jacob Goldfinger. Are you still here? You can speak now. While we're waiting, are there any, for the interpreters, Arabic, Mandarin, and Spanish lines, are there any participants who would like to speak on the language lines?
No comments from the Spanish line.
Okay.
No comments.
Okay.
Sorry, no comments or questions from Arabic line.
Okay, thank you. All good. Okay. So the last agenda item of the night is there are the two resolutions. And for the first one, Maya Rosenblatt, are you still here? Yep, Maya, I see you there. Hi, Maya.
I'm here.
Kevin V, can you share that resolution? And Maya is just going to introduce it. This is the G&T one. Yep.
Quick question, Steve. How much time do you want me to spend on this? You know, this is my favorite topic. I don't want to abuse you.
Be nice and succinct. And really just summarize the resolution itself. The one that, you did so much work on, and, it's been circulated, members have read it, and, it's been in the public domain for the required amount of time. So you don't have to go through the whole thing, but like I would introduce it and highlight it, and that's that.
Sure, succinct is the keyword. Hello, everyone. So we were glad to hear that G&T is being brought back and discussed. And so our group sponsored the resolution. We had extensive discussions. It's on everyone's mind. And as a representative of many, many parents, I may say that it's been one of the hot topics in New York working families. So we familiarized ourselves with the current rules, and we tried to understand what the rules are. So the resolution highlights our questions and the weak areas that we think are, present. Understanding it's a work in progress, hoping more discussions will be had on the topic. So one of the areas that we would like to highlight is the selection criteria. The selection criteria is the teacher will have to observe the child and give the recommendations based on several criteria. We think that it's going to be hard for the teacher. The training is not sufficient. We also heard about that teacher would just say yes and not complete all other sections, and that form would be accepted. So, we heard about this already. Some parents reported that. Also, we think that it's going to be subjective. The kids who are not in pre-K program will be, evaluated differently. So it's not going to be apples to apples. We additionally think that the criteria of the process for parents questioning the process is not worked out yet. There is no well documented way for parents to come back saying they disagree with the decision. Then additionally, we think that I'm just scrolling down. There still be a lottery on top of the evaluations. So it's there's a factor of luck involved as well. We also feel like the English language learners, District 20 has 22% of English language learners. Some criteria of the teacher's evaluation not the punish, but the quieter kids would be in disadvantage. Pre-K is when the kids come to school. I had English ELL child. He was quiet as a mouse until he learned English. And it took several months. Teacher will not be able to evaluate this child as gifted, even though he could be as bright as possible. Also, the 1 to 3 grades are evaluated for GNC based on the school performance, on the grades. We understand it's one of the objective measures because it's quantitative. On the other hand, the 10% top 10 percentile of school performers would be invited to apply to GNC if there are spots. We think it's still subjective, and bored kids who are bored in school because it's boring for them, they may misbehave and they may get lower grades for behavior. So they could be punished for being bored and being smart. We also would like to bring up the point about the programming, because right now GNC programming has not been discussed. We haven't heard much about it. Schools are at liberty to define what they mean by GNC. We also wonder if there is enough teachers who are qualified to be GNC teachers, or are they going to just chew the same material but faster for the GNT kids. So also the funding, we did not hear about the funding for GNT being specifically allotted. We just looked at the fair student funding formula. There was no mention of GNT. And we feel like it's it's supposed to cater to all the children in New York City, including children that are qualified for GNT. And again, I think it's a big miss. I also wanted to add that, GNC as a concept was divested from by city for several years, and that reflects and that, that it has been ignored. So calling all of this to the attention by this resolution. Steve, back to you. Please let me know if I missed anything.
Thanks, Maya. No, that was great. The resolution, it really just asks for introducing some kind of test, some kind of screener into the admission process to reduce the subjectivity, reduce possible bias. There's various reasons why it makes sense to use some kind of screener, and we elaborate on them here. There's the recommendations here, I will say, they're not sort of a rigid test-based set of recommendations. They can include additional measures such as grades, such as teacher nominations, just some improvements, things that we think are improvements to it, so that you'll be able to capture more kids and capture them in a more fair, and if you want to use the word, equitable way. Can you scroll down more, Kevin? A couple things that I think are really important to emphasize here is this is we think the program should have on and off ramps in different years. We think it should involve talking with a team of, just like you would with on any number of education issues, the parents, the teachers, guidance counselors, school administration, a standardized minimum curriculum. Maya pointed this out. There's a wide variety of curricula across schools. We think there should still be some flexibility, but at least a minimum standard, if you label yourself G&T, that you should be held to. As Maya already said this, include a weight in the fair student funding formula. Can you scroll down a little, Kevin? And I think that's, a remainder of these talk about sort of, within the district, instead of having a scarcity of seats, try to address the need as it exists in districts that want to have the programs. And there was also, this is kind of a side recommendation, but I thought it was really interesting. Jen actually made it, which is that the sort of the virtual learning, I know it's been mostly piloted at the high school level, but if there's any way to move some of this process to a virtual environment, that might be interesting to consider. So anyway, that's the resolution. Do any council members want to speak on the resolution before we move to vote on it? I don't see any hands, so let's try and Going once, going twice. Any council members want to speak? Shall we just move to a vote? Is there a motion to vote on this resolution? Motion to approve this resolution?
Second,
You were the first, I think, Vito,
I
unless,
apologize.
so Vito made a motion to approve this resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. So I will take a, you got this? Yeah. Can you take it, Kevin? Great. So Kevin will take a roll call vote. Kevin, our administrative assistant.
The vote for resolution requesting changes and Alvin admission and curriculum. Think so.
Yes,
Jennifer, you.
not here.
Olivia Chen.
Yes.
Rita LaBelle.
Yes.
Marie Barry.
Not here.
God on me.
I'm sorry, we can barely hear him, Steve. I cannot hear him.
Yeah. Kevin, can you unmute or something?
You can't hear me?
Yona, can you hear Kevin?
It's really dim, the voice.
Mic it. Let's give him the mic. 1 second, Yona. Thanks for.
God on me.
Not here.
Jonah Zuki.
Here, thank you for the mic.
Yes, I know the resolution. Jonah.
I said yes.
Are you calling me? Because I can't hear anything. Hi, Kevin, are you calling me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe you take it over, Selena. We're at.
Okay.
That's a little scary.
Can you guys hear me right now? Okay. Okay, I'll just do the votes. Maya Rosenblatt, can you hear me?
I hear you, Steve.
Okay, how would you vote on this resolution?
I approve.
Okay, thank you. Hold on, we did Gada, we did Yona, Maya, Li Ping Zhang.
Yes.
Got it, thank you. Joyce Shi. Joyce, can you say that again, please?
She said yes on the chat. Oh.
Okay. Joyce, was that yes? It has to be verbal, audio.
Joy said yes. She put it on the chat.
Yeah, Joyce, how do you? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kevin Zhao. Kevin Zhao, are you there? Actually, I don't see him in the meeting, do I? Okay, so let me just, so you got all the votes? Great. Thank you.
I don't know about it, but you can say it.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. So the motion passes, 7 yeses for excused absences. So then the next resolution, Li Peng, would you like to introduce? And Kevin, can you share that, please?
大家好，我是张丽萍，我现在介绍一项决议，
Let it go. We'll just let it
支
go.
持州议会 A01275 提案，将农历新年列为纽约州假日的决议。发起人张丽萍，Joy 谢，Kevin 赵，共同发起人有 Jonathan Hu， 还有那个 Steve Stowe。然而，纽约州议员威廉·寇顿发起了一项题为“针对公共建设法律的修正行为，列亚洲农历新年为公共假期”。该提案呼吁把亚裔农历新年定为纽约州公共假期。截止撰写本决议时，该法案有36个共同发起人。然而，根据教育部的数据，第20学期大约44%的学生是亚裔，纽约州人口中亚裔约占9.3%。然而，目前纽约州有13个州假期，其中有几个是纪念文化和历史遗产的，包括有大
I'm sorry, I hear a lot of background noise. Is that me or from that side?
诞辰、6月节、哥伦布日、感恩节和圣诞节。亚洲农历新年代表着同样重要的文化和历史遗产。然而，庆祝亚洲农历新年的家庭常常被迫在送孩子上学或与家人和朋友庆祝之间做出选择。我们学期庆祝亚洲新年的家庭不应该陷入这两难选择的情况。然而，该法案目前已提交给了纽约州议会。John,
I'm sorry, Nitin?
Huh?
A lot of background.
We can only hear the Mandarin translation. We can't hear anything else.
Yeah, I'm speaking in the Mandarin, and then later I will speak in English. Just give me a
There's
second.
background noise.
Sorry.
We can't hear anything you're saying. We can't hear anything you're saying. There's background noise.
Ping, maybe if you turn your volume all the way down.
Okay. It's better now?
No, 李平，你后面有很多咔咔咔的声音，我们听不到你说话。
我这边有很多咔咔咔的声音。
对。
现在还是有吗？
还是有，你是不是用耳机啦？
我没有用耳机啊。
你能把你的 speaker 关掉吗？能把你的 speaker 关掉吗？把你的喇叭关掉。
Hey guys, this is what we're going to do. Kevin, and everyone, we understand there's background noise. Li Ping, we also understand she's speaking Mandarin. She's not speaking English. This is more comfortable for her to read the resolution about Asian Lunar New Year. And so we're just going to let it go and she will finish reading. Perfect.
Okay, that's it.
That's so much better. Wonderful. But Li Ping, you can continue. Is she muted?
I think it's her audio.
I understand.
She just muted.
I understand. Hey, Li Ping.
Okay. Sorry about the background noise.
No problem. Li Ping, you can finish.
Okay.
We'll just deal with it. It's fine. You're reading in Mandarin. Finish your reading in Mandarin, and then if you want, you can do a quick summary in English, or I can do a quick summary if you want in English. Up to you. So go ahead.
Thank you. John Madden 主席领导的州政府常务委员会。所以第20学期社区教育委员会呼吁委员会主席Madam 尽快安排 A01275的听证会。委员会成员投票赞成将 A01275提交给全体大会。纽约州议会员如果进行全场票决，批准法案 A01275。纽约州参议员提出配套立法，如果实质上相似，则在进行全场表决时投赞成票。州长 Kathy Hochul 签署任何批准的法案成为法律。Sorry, hi, my name is Li Ping Jiang, and I'm introducing a resolution which supports making the Lunar New Year a state holiday. Assembly member William Colden has a bill that would do this. We support this bill, which is numbered A1275. The Lunar New Year is a very important event for many Asian families. Our directory has a large number of families who celebrate the Lunar New Year. Many times, families are forced to decide between sending their children to school or staying home to celebrate the holiday with friends and family. This is a choice our District 20 families should not have to make it. We support Assembly Member Collins to make the Lunar New Year a state holiday, and we ask the State Assembly, the State Senate, and the Governor to approve the bill and sign it into the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Li Peng. That was great. Do any members of the council want to speak on the bill? And we'll have two votes because there's one bill that was written in Mandarin first, and then we sort of worked and put it back into English, the English version. So we're gonna vote
I'm sorry,
quickly
Steve,
on.
I had my hand
Yeah.
up.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you, Vito. Go ahead.
So I would like to make a motion to request an amendment to this bill. This bill's a great bill. We certainly support making Lunar New Year a holiday. However, there are some technical problems with the bill because the date floats. So there are other bills out there. It was published in I believe in the Chinese media on Monday that there are other bills out there, other ways to do this. So I don't want to make this bill specific, but rather I would like to add a line in there to say something to the effect of A0125 or any other bill that is brought to the floor, or words to that effect. And I'd request a second and a vote on that.
So Vito's made a motion to add the amendment to the bill that would include the line he just said. He spoke it himself, so I'll let him. Is there a second to his motion? This would be to amend this resolution and add the line that he's discussing.
I'm sorry, can Vito say the line again?
So this A0125, whatever the number is, or any other similar bill that is brought up for a vote. I mean, I'm certainly open to the verbiage there on exactly how to say that, but
So this is what we changed in the bill. I'm sorry, the resolution. Bill is what the assembly member has. We have a resolution. In the resolution, it doesn't even have the date. Okay, it just says this bill, we support this bill in substantially similar form, substantially similar defined as making the Lunar New Year a state holiday. That's what it says now, just to be clear.
But you're mentioning the specific bill. What I would like to do is mention this bill or any other similar bill.
Yeah, I mean, you have a motion, so you've made a motion. You have a right to have someone else second it, and then.
And the only reason, because now if this bill doesn't get approved, or if another bill is there, then it's just like, okay, well, we had the advocacy for this bill, but we could have had the advocacy for whatever bill does eventually get passed.
Right, we lose. This bill will not. Our resolution will not be as strong, is my view. If we broaden it in that way.
Okay.
But you made a motion, so that you absolutely have a right. Is there a second to Vito's motion? And then we'd have to vote on the amendment. Okay, so we're not going to bring up that amendment.
Okay, thank you.
So let's go to a roll call vote.
I think we're supposed to bring up a amendment to the resolution, and now they don't use Columbus Day, they use Italian and Heritage Day.
Not at the state. State is Columbus Day.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. I'll do a roll call. So is there a motion to approve this bill? And we're going to approve this one and then the Mandarin one just quickly right next to each other, or vote on them. So is there a motion to vote on this one, the English language resolution for Lunar New Year?
Motion to vote.
Motion.
Thank you. Is there a second? Yes,
Second.
thank you. I'll take a roll call vote. Steve Stowe. I vote yes. Jennifer Hugh is absent. Elizabeth Chan,
Yes.
Vito Labella,
Yes.
Marie Brugueras is absent. Gada Amin is absent. Yona Isufi.
Yes.
Great, thank you, Yona. Li Ping,
Yes.
we know it's Li Ping. Maya Rosenblatt
Yes.
and Joyce Shi
Yes.
and Kevin Zhao.
Yes.
Great, the resolution is approved. With 8 yeses and 3 excused absences. And then the second one, Kevin, can you just share the Mandarin one just to officially share it before we vote on it? We just created the resolution, Mandarin, they wrote it up, the sponsors wrote it in Mandarin. Obviously for better distribution through our Asian community. And this is the final, I don't know if there's anyone who has anything to say now, or if there's a motion to just move to a vote on this one. It's the same language.
I can do the emotion.
Thank you, Kevin. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I will now take roll call vote on this one. Steve Stowe, how do you vote? I vote yes to approve. Jen Hugh, absent. Elizabeth Chan.
Yes.
Thank you. Vito Labella.
Yes.
Marie Brugueras is absent. Gada is absent. Yona.
Yes.
Thank you. Li Ping.
Yes.
Maya. Maya Rosenblatt.
Yes.
Thank you. Joyce Shi
Yes.
and Kevin Zhao.
Yes.
Thank you. So this resolution is approved, 8 yeses and 3 excused. And with that, we're at the end of our calendar meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn the calendar meeting?
Before that, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I have to step away before, so I didn't vote for the GNT one. Is it possible for me to make it up now?
Oh, you were not here for that vote?
No.
I stepped away.
Okay. We'd have to call for another vote entirely.
Oh,
Which is fine, I guess. Yeah, because you want to be on record for that, right? It's not possible for you to just come in now and say, I meant to vote yes, but we would just have to do a motion to have a revote on it.
I make a motion to have a revote.
Okay, thanks, Vito. Was there a
thank you,
second?
Vito.
Second.
Okay. We will now do a revote on the GNT resolution. Steve Stowe, how do you vote? I vote yes. Jen Hugh is absent. Elizabeth Chan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Vito Labella?
Yes.
Marie is absent. Gada is absent. Yona Isufi?
Yes.
Thank you. Li Ping?
Yes.
Maya Rosenblatt?
Yes.
Joyce Shi?
Yes.
Joyce? Thank you. Kevin Zhao?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the GNT resolution on the revote is approved, 8 votes, yes, 3 not in attendance. And then we do have to finish through the minutes, as Kevin was about to tell me. So the last item on the calendar meeting is approval of the January minutes. Kevin, can you share those, please?
Also taking the special meeting.
Yes, good point. Yes, very good point. We will have to approve the special meeting minutes as well. So Kevin is just going to share the minutes from January for our approval. So everyone, please look at the January calendar meeting minutes. If you have any changes, please speak up. Any changes to the minutes? Okay, hearing none, the minutes are approved. And then can you also share the special meeting minutes? This was our special meeting for parent involvement for primarily for pre-K parents. Okay, any changes to the special meeting minutes? Okay, hearing none, the special meeting minutes are approved. Is there a motion to adjourn the calendar meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, so thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending. We, the next, Kevin, do you know the date of the next CEC calendar meeting is March 8th. So everyone, please join us then. I recommend we go right into our business meeting now. Anyone else need a break or anything, or should we just get the business meeting going? Good, let's do it. So welcome.